Watch 10 hellish jokes every day, then attack 10 defenses, randomly select 10 lucky passersby to face each other passionately, and finally repent to the Buddha without any remorse. Finally, my merits have fallen, but I am also invincible. I thought I was just invincible to humanity, until the deceased buried during the day was dug out of the grave by me at night. Jianghu Warlock, Heavenly Master, half-step Immortal, free true God, evil spirits disturb the heart, sharp ghosts harm people, ferocious spirits destroy virtue, and evil spirits destroy the way. Spiritual revival is imminent, and ghosts may travel at night or in the present day. However, there is a very important issue now. Who can tell me why I used Buddhism to cultivate witchcraft? Keywords of the novel. Spiritual resurrection. It doesn't matter, I will speak up. No pop-ups, supernatural revival. It doesn't matter, I will speak up. Download the complete TXT collection, Supernatural Revival. It doesn't matter, I will speak up. Latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Retaliatory measures unique to defense. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Retaliatory measures unique to defense. In midsummer, the dryness, heat, and dampness do not converge even at night. The noisy chirping of cicadas on trees is even more annoying and unsettling. A park surrounded by this forest is incredibly quiet and cool, Los Angeles Cemetery. At this moment, in an inconspicuous corner, a young man was secretly observing the epitaphs on each tombstone. Finally, he stopped and slowly squatted down. He picked up an apple from one of the tombstones, took a bite, took out his phone, and turned around to take a picture of himself nibbling on the apple along with the tombstone. Then he contentedly sent the photo to someone on his contact list, along with an emotional voice message. Fool! Can you frame me for stealing? All right, meet you. His mother me, steal your mother's tribute at your mother's grave. After finishing all of this, he didn't rush to leave, but simply sat at the grave and started scrolling through the video, waiting for a reply. As expected, within 2 minutes, a voice message lasting over a minute came over. Due to the other person speaking too quickly and being too emotional, the whole paragraph was like rap, and he didn't hear what the other person was saying clearly. He finally understood the last sentence. Jiang, you're really damn it. Although she was scolded, Jiang Shan's face was about to burst into laughter. He likes to see this kind of clown jumping in a hurry. If it weren't for consulting a lawyer and breaking the law by digging graves, he had even planned to take a photo with the urn. When he was still a baby, Jiang Shan was abandoned outside a small temple and adopted by the old abbot of the temple. As a child, Jiang Shan had a cute and kind-hearted appearance, and the old abbot gave him the Dharma name, Shan, hoping that he would maintain a compassionate heart in the face of everything. But the fact proves that even the purest child may have a crooked day. Until last year, when the old abbot heard Jiang Shan shouting to a pilgrim, "Poor monk Yuan Shan, poor monk Yuan wants to pity your code," he finally couldn't bear it anymore and vented his 10-year accumulated anger of King Kong. He drove him down the mountain, told him his surname, and returned the token with the character Jiang printed on it to him. Jiang Shan, who came down the mountain, had no education or work experience, so she had to rely on her passion to work as a temporary worker at the funeral home. Her job was to help the undertaker tidy up the body, apply makeup, sew wounds, and so on. Although the salary is not high, it can be considered more than enough for one person to have enough to eat and the whole family not to be hungry. Until a few days ago, after a normal farewell party, the family of a deceased person who passed by him approached him and said he had stolen something, stealing a ring worth tens of thousands of yuan from the deceased's body. No matter how Jiang Shan explains, it's useless. It's not easy to monitor or search. Anyway, the other party always has new words. In the end, not only did the other party's family think so, but even the leaders of the funeral home became suspicious and asked him to temporarily rest at home for a few days. Although Jiang Shan had never attended school, he had already met various people when he was a knowledgeable monk in a temple. He was also considered a genius and knew what this meant. He was just a temporary worker, not to mention right or wrong. The impact of this incident on the funeral home alone was enough to make him leave. It took a lot of effort to get this job back then. In order to prove his courage and meticulousness, he carefully classified all the corpses according to their degree of damage and handed over a flow construction design plan, which gave him this precious opportunity to have a meal. Now, if he loses his job due to this kind of thing, he cannot accept it. Lying in bed in the middle of the night, Zhongxie became increasingly angry as she thought about it. It was only then that she took a taxi to the grave of the deceased who had already been buried and stole the tribute. The goal was achieved, and after a few days of depression, Zhongxi's heart also felt a lot better. She put the apple she had nibbled on back in front of the monument. "Auntie, it's not against you. Today, on the 14th, I'll give you an apple. If you don't know how to use it, you can go home tonight and ask your son." After speaking, he stood up and patted his pants legs, ready to go home and sleep. But at this moment, a dark wind suddenly blew up in the originally peaceful cemetery. Although it was June, the piercing cold and warmth brought by this gust of wind gave Jianghu the illusion of standing naked on the mountain on a cold winter night. He couldn't help but shudder and furrowed his brow, because behind the tombstone, at some point, a woman who was sobbing with her head down appeared. She was wearing a bright red wedding dress, kneeling on the ground, bowing her head, unable to see her face clearly. Zhongxie was a bit puzzled. He remembered that he didn't have this person when he came. Was it a problem with the angle? He was blocked by the tombstone, so he didn't see it all along. Although he was kicked out of the temple, it was impossible for him to have any Buddhist nature for over a decade. When faced with such a situation, he instinctively wanted to see if there was anything he could help with. Therefore, Zhongxie walked forward confidently and comforted her softly, crying so sadly, "Has anyone died in your family?" Upon hearing this, the woman lifted her head slowly and mechanically. In an instant, Jianghu furrowed her brows and saw that the woman's eyes were incredibly empty. Literally, they were two dark and profound black holes. 2 lines of blood and tears flowed incessantly from the corner of their eyes, dripping onto the ground and instantly turning into a pool of black water. Zhongxie awkwardly touched her head and felt a hint of guilt for her recklessness. I turned out to be blind. No wonder, she cried behind the tombstone. "Tell me who died in your family, and I'll take you to find the grave. Don't cry about other people's houses. Don't let the fat and water flow out of the fields, do you know?" While Zhongxie spoke, the woman was stunned. She has been living in this cemetery for 100 years, feeding on the residual evil and resentment of freshly buried people. It can be said that she is not strong, but often the stronger the existence, the more subtle things can be felt. The man in front of him exuded a strange aura, with ominous and evil thoughts lingering around him. Just the tip of the leaked iceberg completely silenced her. Just taking a glance, the woman's eyes felt a piercing pain like needles, and tears and blood flowed out. What the hell is this? What kind of millennium evil has come into being? Looking at the stunned woman, Zhongxie, who had been waiting for a response for a long time, also felt a bit impatient. She shrugged and said, "Forget it, whatever you want. But before I leave, I still have to remind you that your behavior of crying in front of your deceased is not NTR. Although it is not illegal, it is unethical." The woman was horrified to find that, whether it was an illusion or not, after Zhongxie said these words, the faint and dangerous aura around him had increased a bit. And the usually sinister and domineering evil thoughts that have been secretly consumed over the years are now shrouded in her body and afraid to move, as if she is firmly locked in. This also means that she is not even as good as an ordinary person now. Dong, dong, dong. Just as Zhongxie had left for a while, the woman was about to breathe a sigh of relief when a crisp tapping sound came from not far away. Zhongxie felt a bit dazed and instinctively turned her head. Unconsciously, I haven't heard this familiar voice for over a year. Following the sound, a middle-aged monk, dressed in a washed white but still clean monk robe, knocked on a wooden fish, appeared in sight. His legs moved slowly, but the speed was not slow at all. It was almost just a fleeting effort, and the monk even crossed dozens of meters. He looked at the woman who had clearly been greatly impacted and smiled. "Let the poor monk surpass you." Without waiting for the woman to react, he hastily knocked on the wooden fish and threw a diamond bowl, which covered the woman with lightning and fire. It was unclear whether the diamond bowl had grown larger or the woman had become smaller. In short, by the time the dust settled, the diamond bowl had returned to the monk's hand. The whole process was smooth and flowing, and the monk's lips were always adorned with a compassionate smile. All of this seemed to him to be so casual and leisurely. This surprised Zhongxie, who was watching the play on the side, and she couldn't help but speak up and ask. "Who should I show you how handsome you are? Which hill are you from?" The monk clearly didn't notice anyone next to him and was startled. The wooden fish almost fell to the ground without holding it steady. But he quickly managed his facial expressions and looked kindly at Zhongxie, saying, "Almsgiver, I." Before he could finish speaking, just one glance left his eyes wide open, almost jumping out of their sockets. The monk seemed to have seen an extremely terrifying scene, took a few steps back and leaned against the tombstone behind him, pointing at Zhongxie, and shouted fiercely with a broken voice. What kind of demon? Newcomers set sail, please support us." End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Young People's First Wooden Fish. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Young People's First Wooden Fish. Where is the demon? You have spoken several times and hurt people. Zhongxi's admiration for the handsome operation of the monk immediately turned into disdain. His master once said that the most important thing in practicing Buddhism is to cultivate one's mind. A monk who attacks others immediately when he speaks is definitely not a serious monk. Bold. Are you still there? Wait a moment. The monk pointed at Zhongxie and was about to say a few harsh words before finding an opportunity to run away. However, he realized that something was wrong. Although the young man in front of him was full of the sinister aura unique to ghosts and monsters, upon closer inspection, he realized that he was clearly a living person. After traveling south and north for so many years, he has seen many terrifying ghosts and monsters. Even the ferocious ones, he was fortunate enough to have met one or two by chance. However, their breath was not as pure and evil as the person in front of him. This made him wonder whether the person in front of him had accidentally come into contact with something, or was it simply an exaggerated ferocity that could conceal his perception. The monk carefully scrutinized Zhongxie, who was seen feeling uneasy all over and couldn't help but ask, "What kind of gaze are you giving? Are you practicing the joyful Buddha? I'm glad of you. Amitabha Buddha, this benefactor, I see that your printing hall has turned black. What have you been contaminated with recently?" Something bad." The monk was very tactful, afraid that Zhongxie might be in existence beyond his imagination. He said the wrong thing and offended him, so he nervously probed. "If you say that," Zhongxie thought for a moment and naturally sat back at the grave. She picked up a banana, peeled it off, and started eating it, making the monk's eyelids skip a beat. "Recently, I've been hitting someone wrong, my work hasn't been smooth, my colleagues don't like me, and my interpersonal relationships are in a mess." Zhongxie sighed and his words were full of bitterness. The breakdown of adults often happens in a moment. If it weren't for the unbearable situation, who would come to the grave in the middle of the night to steal tribute? The monk looked at the banana peel that was casually thrown on the ground with his spare light and thought to himself, even if we can't bear it anymore, normal people can't do such a thing, can we? However, the small details in Zhongxi's mouth made him slightly relax his guard. No matter how he looked at it, the other person was just an ordinary person. But for safety reasons, he further probed, "Do you know that one just now was a ghost?" "I know," Jianghu thought without hesitation. "Oh." The monk's gaze suddenly sharpened. Jiang Shan's reason, however, was beyond his expectations. If it were a person who was accepted into such a small diamond bowl by you, would that be enough? Well, that's right, but you don't seem surprised at all. Jiang Shan stared at the wooden fish in the monk's hand, seemingly reminiscing. I used to be a carefree little monk, living a life of romance, and lust. Is this the day that a monk should live? Jiang Shan glared at him and continued, what I mean by saying this is that I used to be a monk, and my master clearly told me that there are ghosts in the world. I have also followed my master to help others with rituals, so I am not as ignorant as ordinary people. I have seen the world before. The monk clasped his hands together and recited the Buddhist chant, almost certain that this was some unlucky person who had been infected with great terror at some point. However, if one can still survive this kind of existence, they must also have a great fortune. At this moment, his thoughts flowed and he asked calmly. You said you were once a monk. Can a wooden fish knock or recite Buddhist scriptures? Jiang Shan nodded and then the monk handed him the wooden fish in his hand, hoping to test its composition. Upon receiving the wooden fish, Jiang Shan's overall demeanor suddenly changed. He really had a hint of a dignified appearance, which made the monk nod in secret. He is indeed a member of Buddhism. Jiang Shan remembered the scripture that the monk had just recited by the transcendent woman, which was the earth canon. While transcending, he could accumulate merits for himself and receive blessings from heaven and humanity. He naturally recited this scripture, which he had copied countless times under the supervision of his master. The monk's eyes lit up and he didn't expect to go out for a trip. He really found a good seedling. The fluency of reciting scriptures and the Buddhist rhyme were enough to make many old monks who had been in the industry for a long time sigh with admiration. How could such a young person return to secular life? Isn't his former master not good enough in Taoism and lacking in vision? If we can cultivate it well, over time, we may not be able to become the backbone of the gatekeepers. Just as he was overjoyed by the hunt and had the idea of accepting apprentices, he suddenly found that the environment around him had become somewhat gloomy. Looking up again, I saw that at some point, among the hundreds of graves of all sizes around me, there were actually ghosts standing on each of them, approaching with Zhongxie as the center. Although they are only the lowest level ghosts, they cannot withstand a large number. Most of these ghosts have been cursed by the previous woman, with their souls in disarray, some even leaving only a body floating in the air, eerie with a hint of humor. This kind of scene of 100 ghosts wandering at night is something that even a monk has never seen before, and the first reaction is that it feels outrageous. Normally, ordinary ghosts should not be able to appear on their own. And the second reaction is the danger of capitalization. But the monk was not panicked. Although he didn't know the reason, even the most ordinary ghosts, even if they were in astonishing numbers, couldn't shake him at all. This was the pride of being a heavenly master. But just as he was about to take action, pretending to be big in front of Jiang Shan and deceiving him to follow him back to the mountain to cultivate immortality, the ghosts suddenly stopped in their tracks. It turns out that at some point, Jiang Di stopped reciting scriptures. He looked at the ghosts, layers upon layers, staring intently at them, lost in thought. Amitabha Buddha. The monk recited the Buddha's name and said in a loud voice, "Don't be afraid. If I'm here, no one can harm you at all." However, Jiang Shan seemed to have not heard what he was saying and muttered to herself, seeing everyone so disabled and determined that even if they were in a state of disrepair, they wanted to come out and become demons. I suddenly felt that the suffering life had brought me was nothing, especially the long legs of that big brother or sister. Thank you. Seeing you, I suddenly felt a sense of superiority again. The monk turned around and stared at Jiang Shan in confusion, as if saying, "Do you want to listen and see what you're talking about?" But before he could speak, Jiang Shan knocked on the wooden fish again. I am deeply moved by this situation and would like to sing a song. Thank you all for your inspiration. A song to kill that SJZ person for everyone. This is the first SJZ person I killed this year. I hope you like it. Before the monk could react, the wooden fish he used to suppress demons and eliminate demons seemed to turn into a drum in Zhongxie's hand. Accompanied by a dull beat, Jianghu actually started singing. The monk's eyelids twitched wildly. Setting aside this kid's rebellious brain circuits, his singing was so melodious. The monk felt the sound of magic piercing his ears, but the ghosts seemed to have been redeemed. The originally wicked cemetery soon became filled with a peaceful atmosphere. In the monk's eyes, a golden aura surged from the eyebrows of the ghosts, converging towards Zhongxie. Merit. The monk widened his eyes. He had worked hard all day to overcome his unjust soul, and just now he even surpassed a fierce ghost. In the end, it's not as good as earning 1/10 of the merit from a song. Is it really better to be a celebrity than to move bricks? After finishing the song, Jiangxi's feelings were still lingering, and the ghosts in the cemetery also refused to leave for a long time. Let's go. Jianghu waved her hand, and the ghosts gradually faded away and disappeared into place. Turning his head again, the monk turned his back to him, slightly raising his head and looking up at the sky, unable to see his expression clearly. Do you often do such things? Jiangxi's mouth deflated. Why is this monk so fond of pretending? He placed his hand on the monk's shoulder and forcefully pulled him over. Eh. With the monk's exclamation, Jiangdi replied seriously. This is the first time I have done such a thing. The monk's eyes narrowed slightly, as if he wanted to see the depth of Zhongxie. I used to play Suona. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Grand Luxury Motha. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 Grand Luxury Motha. The monk looked at Jianghu, and Jianghu also looked at the monk. The two of them looked at each other silently. For a long time, the monk reached out and lifted Jianghu's palm off his shoulder, saying in a deep voice, "How much do you know about the world of ghosts and monsters?" Jianghu pursed her lips, seeming to struggle with her expression. After a while, she asked in a deep voice, "What is the world of ghosts and monsters? You don't know what kind of hesitation you're putting on me." The monk finally couldn't hold back. Jianghu chuckled twice and said, "I have never seen ghosts or monsters before. I only know that there is such a thing, but after doing so many rituals, I have never seen a living ghost." "Oh, no, ghosts are not actually alive. Anyway, that's just the meaning. I saw the scene just now for the first time, it's quite frightening and reasonable. Even though they are ordinary people, they can attract ghosts and monsters. The extraordinary wooden fish in your hands becomes a soul-summoning thing, which can purify ghosts and obtain merits." The monk looked around and saw that the golden light just now was like an illusion, with no trace of it on Jianghu, as if this person was naturally immune to merit. "But he's nowhere to be found, strange. It's really strange." Jianghu's heart trembled, and his intuition told him that the monk in front of him seemed to have something more than he had imagined, and he couldn't help but be interested in the things that these masters have always kept hidden. So he instantly awakened his knowledge of being a knowledgeable person in his DNA, pulled out a half-burned incense from the nearby tombstone, and respectfully handed it to the monk. "Uncle Abbot, come on, don't say anything. Take a stick of incense to moisten your throat." Upon hearing this, the monk's lips twitched and rolled up his sleeves, placing his hand on his waist. "To be honest, what is your master's name?" "Let me see if I recognize him," he said. "Oh my, our uncle and nephew are talking about what that terrible old man is doing." Seeing the monk's gaze becoming increasingly out of place, Jianghu coughed twice and said sternly, "I was kicked out by my master. He didn't allow me to mention his name outside, saying that I would defeat his merits." The monk sucked his teeth and suddenly realized. "Your master understands emotions. He made you return to secular life purely because your child is a troublemaker, right? On the contrary, I thought I had found a treasure and almost became a scapegoat. I'm the clown in the end, right?" With mixed emotions, the monk finally realized that he could form a good relationship with Zhongxie, not have any relationship with him. After much thought, the monk folded his arms and took out a booklet, handing it to Zhongxie. The latter took it and looked at the cover, feeling a sense of shock. 4 big characters from top to bottom. De shi Motha. In the Mahayana Yoshitaka, it is said. Luxury meditation, this name is changed to stop. Grasp the mind and stay at the fate. Luxury meditation, also known as stop, means grasping the mind and stay at the fate, far from being scattered. For Buddhism, which is highly valued for cultivating the mind, shma was something that Zhongxie had long been exposed to. However, the scripture in his hand seemed to be different from what he had known before. At least Zhongxie had never seen an independent system dedicated to shma, which often only appeared briefly in various Buddhist scriptures. He was about to look up and ask the monk what this meant, but he found that the monk who had just been in front of him had disappeared, leaving only a few words on the gravel ground. Jianghu Warlock, Heavenly Master, half-step Immortal, free true God, evil spirits disturb the heart, sharp ghosts harm people, ferocious spirits destroy virtue, and evil spirits destroy the way. Spiritual revival is imminent, and ghosts may travel at night or in the present day. You will not die when encountering evil spirits, but your merits and virtues will retreat, and your good fortune will pass. If this continues, disaster will arise. I am sending you a great luxury mantra. If you can break free from the mundane world and step into the ranks of sorcerers with this scripture, you will be able to resolve the calamity. Within 10 years, if you cannot succeed, there will be no one to help you. If you were still alive 10 years later, I would come to find you. Zhongxie frowned and stared at these few lines of text for a while, but couldn't see why. What riddle person? However, one of these words caught Zhongxi's attention. Fierce and ominous. I still remember when I was kicked out of the temple by my master, I heard this sentence. You don't even know how much merit you owe to the Buddha now. If this continues, you will almost become a ferocious demon. Go down the mountain quickly, the temple is too small to accommodate you. What adjective did you think was ferocious at the time, but now it seems like it's a noun? Zhongxie wiped her nose and said, I always feel like something's not good. He put away the shimo and prepared to go home first, but suddenly realized that the monk's wooden fish had not been taken away. Staring at the wooden fish lying quietly on the ground, Jianghu suddenly had a bold idea in her mind: a certain apartment building in downtown Los Angeles. A man kept patting the armrest of the sofa and cursing. How dare he? If he dares to steal tribute from my mother's grave today, he won't be able to dig up our ancestral tomb tomorrow. His wife walked over to the man with a fruit platter and sat down with a somewhat unnatural expression. Husband, we had such a scene a few days ago, but today we found out that the ring was secretly hidden by our son. If it were to be spread, she said. The man's gaze suddenly darkened. What are you afraid of? If you don't say it, if I don't say it, if my son doesn't say it, who knows where the ring went? It's all up to this. I firmly believe it was him who stole it. Humph, I didn't expect him to dare to do such a thing. Although he can't be sent to prison, it's already a dead end to make him lose his job. Tomorrow, I'll go find their leader. Zhi, the two of them followed the sound and saw a 7 or 8-year-old boy timidly holding onto the door frame, looking embarrassed and uneasy. Mom and Dad, but my grandmother once told me to be an honest person. If she knows, she will get angry. As soon as the woman heard this, she couldn't help but feel angry and said, You dead child, what did you do so long ago? You didn't secretly hide the ring, why did you do so much? The man crossed his hands on his chest, closed his eyes and leaned back wearily, without any intention of helping the little boy speak. But, the little boy's tears streamed down. I just wanted to secretly leave something that would remind me of my grandmother. The man was a bit annoyed when he heard the crying and waved his hand at the little boy. All right, isn't it that your dad and I are wiping your butt now? Don't worry about these things. You will understand when you grow up in the future. Go back and do your homework. The little boy still stood by the door, rubbing his eyes and sobbing softly. Suddenly, the man burst into flames and stood up, slapping him to teach him a lesson. The woman ate the fruit without any intention of stopping her. At that moment, a knock on the door rang out of place. The man and woman exchanged a glance, and then the woman returned to the room with the child. The man carefully approached the anti-theft door and looked out from the door, asking, "Who?" I'm here to apologize to you." The voice was very familiar, and as expected, the man saw the carefree Jianghu from the door, and immediately felt a little embarrassed and angry. He pushed open the door and angrily rebuked, "How do you know where my house lives? You're a killer, I'll tell you, this matter won't end so easily. I'm not finished with you." Jianghu was not angry at the words, but explained with a smile. "Oh, don't worry, actually I was reflecting later. Although you falsely accused me, I shouldn't be so extreme either. This time, I'm here. Firstly, I want to clear the misunderstanding, and secondly, I want to help you find the ring. I think it's very likely that it's at your home." Misunderstanding. I didn't have any misunderstanding with you. I just remembered to apologize now. What should I have done earlier? The man sneered. He had already made up his mind to press Jianghu to death. Not to mention that he stole tribute from his deceased mother's grave. Let's just say that he is a mere temporary worker who died on the street without anyone looking at him again. It doesn't matter who is right or wrong. Either he loses the ring money and goes away, or he goes away directly. Anyway, if we find the ring, we won't lose out no matter what. TSK 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 TSK. Jianghu smiled, so angry. Don't worry, you can definitely find it. After all, I'm not here alone. Guess who I brought with me? I'm telling you, it's not easy for you to take anyone with you. If you don't leave, I'll call the police. The man is aggressive and doesn't even care who Jianghu brought. Out of curiosity, he casually glanced behind Jianghu, and it was this glance that made his face turn pale with fear, leaving him stunned and unable to speak. Seeing him like this, Jianghu was laughing uncontrollably. I didn't expect it. I brought you spicy and numb. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Soul Returning Night. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Soul Returning Night. The man trembled for a long time before he squeezed out his voice like phlegm from his throat. Mom, what are you doing? You numb paraffin. But it's okay, I put her on resurrection armor, so she came back to life. Zhongxie said humbly. He didn't originally know the address of the deceased, but with the help of the wooden fish left by the monk, he successfully called out the ghost of the deceased by adding his name during the recitation process. After trying to express to the ghost that they needed to find the ring, the ghost acted autonomously. Jianghu followed all the way here. When she found out that the ghost had arrived at her house, Jiangxi's lungs were almost bursting with anger. What does this mean? This indicates that the ring is actually at home, never brought to the funeral home, and has never been touched by oneself. How could it be stolen? It is clear that this family of thieves is shouting to catch thieves and trying to extort themselves. He originally intended to give up by filming a video as evidence and finding the ring from their house on the spot, but seeing the man still being so persistent and unreasonable, he couldn't help it anymore. Stop pretending. I have a showdown. Not only did I steal your mother's tribute, but I also brought your mother with me. Auntie, go and see where you left your ring. As soon as the words fell, the ghost also took action. This move doesn't matter, the man who was originally thinking of luck was scared enough. The ghost moved, and the hot summer night disappeared without a trace in an instant, replaced by the piercing cold and warmth. Looking at the gray-white face, dull expression, and stiff movements of the old lady's ghost, the man began to shout like he had taken fake medicine. Is it true? It's true. Ah. Mom. How did you come out? The man let out a strange cry and ran back frantically, not knowing what he stumbled on. He slammed his dog into the mud and didn't have time to pay attention to the pain. He got up again, rushed into the bathroom, and slammed the door shut. The woman who heard the sound came out of the little boy's bedroom to check and coincidentally saw the ghost of the old lady coming towards her. Compared to men, she was even more unbearable. Her eyes rolled white, she let out a muffled groan, and she fell to the ground in a daze. The little boy poked out half of his head and first saw Jianghu leaning on the door frame, tilting his head to look at him with interest. Then he saw the ghost of the old lady in front of him. After being personally tested by Zhongxie, the ghost of the old lady poses no threat to the living except for scaring people. He has already tested this with a small scoundrel who stole money from a blind beggar's bowl on the road, so he is not worried about causing any problems. At most, it is just a psychological shadow. But then again, in this era where jade disease is rampant, whose psychology is not a problem. So it's not a big problem. Jiangxu had never seen the little boy before, but this did not prevent him from continuing his actions. If he were to be spoiled because he was still a child, then such a child would be destined for relative failure in the future. To Jiangxi's surprise, the little boy was not scared, but instead pouted and cried sadly. "Grandma, have you come to see me?" He rubbed his bright red eyes and reached out his other hand to grab the sleeve of the old lady's ghost. He seemed to have no idea that it was a ghost, or rather, even if it was a ghost, he was determined to touch it without hesitation. What surprised Zhongxie even more was that the ghost, like a robot that only moves after giving instructions, stiffly raised its hand and grabbed at the little boy along the way. Zhongxie was startled and immediately approached to stop, but as soon as she lifted her leg, she withdrew it. Because the ghost of the old lady just placed her hand on the little boy's head and gently stroked it, that's all. "Grandma." The little boy sobbed uncontrollably, took out a ring from his pocket, held it in both hands, and handed it to the old lady. "Are you here to retrieve your ring? I just want to think of you often. My parents don't let me go out and say, I'm really, really an honest child. Don't be angry." Jiangxu looked at the scene with a complex expression, then sighed, saved the video on her phone, and said, "Let's go." As soon as the words fell, the ghost of the old lady withdrew her hand and followed Jiangxu away. It's like the warmth just now was just an illusion, it's still that dull and mechanical ghost. "Grandma." The little boy knelt on the ground and burst into tears. Jianghu, who had already arrived at the elevator entrance, paused for a moment and then returned to the door. "Your grandmother said that as long as you are honest and always a good child, she will still come to see you." After speaking, he gently closed the door, regardless of whether the little boy had anything else to say. Rather than saying he didn't give the little boy a chance, it's better to say he didn't want to listen to these things. For Jiangxu, who felt unfamiliar with all of this, it was just adding to her troubles. Arriving at the entrance of the community, Jiangxu turned to look at the old lady with a dull face, took out a wooden fish, and recited the mantra of rebirth. If there really is a paradise, at least it can give you the opportunity to see your grandson with joy and not make him too sad. With the sound of wooden fish and recitation of scriptures, the ghost of the old lady gradually faded away and finally disappeared into place. The sound of the wooden fish stopped, and just as Zhongxie was lamenting how kind she was, she heard someone upstairs pushing open the window and cursing, "Knock on your mother, wait, I'll come down and kill you." Jiangxi's face suddenly turned black. This is no different from being called out by the teacher to answer a question during a home quarantine online class, after being glued and immersed in the aftertaste. It's even more disgusting than discovering a pile of maggot-wrapped mouse feces while drinking soup. It's true that Jiangxi was at fault first and shouldn't have made noise at night, but hasn't it already stopped? Moreover, in a civilized society, is this the reason why you speak wildly? Can't you speak well? At first glance, I'm used to it and haven't been beaten by society. Jianghu squinted her eyes and counted the floors of the window-opening house, then took a deep breath and shouted with all her strength, Unit 302, Big Brother's wife is having an affair. The child is not his. He is a green hat slave. The single man in our community is lucky. After shouting, run, and the whole action is completed in one go. The social guys who were originally just idle and wanted to pretend to be in front of their wives and children are all foolish. Nowadays, people are not only so tough, but they can even open their mouths and come. Don't even think about it, Unit 302 will definitely be remembered by the people in the community forever. In fact, the lights of dozens or hundreds of households suddenly lit up, and they began to ask each other on the windowsill which ruthless person lived in Unit 302. Tonight is destined to be a sleepless night, except for Zhongxie, who has hidden his achievements and fame deeply. The first thing Jianghu did when she returned home was to repent in front of the Buddha statue worshipped at home. But this Buddha statue is somewhat different from the Buddha statue outside, because his right hand is not in the shape of a flower, but is comparing to a Buddha with a six and a solemn appearance, and surprisingly shows a smile similar to Maitreya Buddha. After recounting the act of splashing dirty water, Zhongxie looked at the Buddha statue sincerely. Buddha, I regret making the mistake of not telling lies as a monk. If you forgive me, just give me a 6-point deduction and laugh with me. Then Jianghu nodded devoutly and said, I understand, Amitabha Buddha. I will increase my efforts in the future. After finishing all of this, Jianghu finally finished his daily Buddhist practice. Then, he first edited the video he had taken from the old lady's house, took out the little boy's ring, and sent the content that everything was defamed by the deceased's family to the leaders of the funeral home. You should believe me now. After making sure everything was arranged properly, he finally took out the luxurious book left by the monk from his arms and began to study it seriously. The more she looked, the more shocked Jianghu's expression became. Although it's just a difference of one word, compared to those Buddhist scriptures that only talk about luxury, he can't even understand a single word of this great luxury. Just as he thought this was some kind of precious heavenly book, he was stunned for a moment, as if he had discovered something. Grass, take it upside down. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. The 5 Realms of Human and Ghost. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. The 5 Realms of Human and Ghost. Luxuriously seeking others, with a calm mind, and a serene body, one can observe the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the audience, and by seeing one's own body, one can attain the position of fruition. Jianghu read the preface word by word, vaguely realizing something. Unlike the samatha mentioned by the master, this book seems to not only advocate for meditation and emptiness when practicing Buddhism, but also to achieve something extraordinary through this method. The monk flipped his hand and the posture of taking away the female ghost with a diamond bowl emerged in his mind, giving Zhongxie a bold guess. Is there really a way to practice in the world? Jianghu became interested and continued to read. By the time I roughly read the entire scripture, it was already late at night without realizing it. Jianghu's intelligence is very exaggerated, otherwise the old abbot who adopted him would not have cultivated him so carefully. If it weren't for his crooked appearance later on, it wouldn't be too much to say that the next host has already been predetermined. So I just looked at it once, and aside from some details that still need to be considered, the general core has already been fully understood by Jianghu. Overall, this is not just a Buddhist scripture, but a systematic method of cultivation. According to the scriptures, there are roughly 5 stages from mortals to transcending mortals. The first stage is for ordinary people, who are very fragile, afraid of cold and heat, prone to illness and injury, and follow the natural laws of life and death. The second stage is for martial arts sorcerers, who understand some basic techniques, can confuse and listen, can communicate and see a part of the essence of the world, such as communicating with the dead, controlling dead objects such as paper figures, raising little ghosts, and using goo to raise goo, all of which are methods that martial arts sorcerers can use. For Buddhism, it is the ability to strengthen the body, nourish qi, and ward off demons and evil spirits. In the past, martial arts sorcerers were already enough to rely on as a means of traveling north and south, and many talented people had left good or bad names in future generations relying on them. However, in reality, among the entire group of practitioners, they are only beginners. This third stage, known as the Heavenly Master, is enough to illustrate the abilities of these people. They have already touched the essence of the world and can use some methods that ordinary people cannot imagine. Seeking rain, seeking luck, calculating fate, all are insignificant things for them. If we compare some of the unimaginable methods of the martial arts sorcerers to the level of undergraduate students, then the abilities of the Heavenly Master are like those of the 985 doctor, no longer confined to paper, and their attitude towards knowledge has shifted from learning and using to exploring and discovering, which is a qualitative leap. The fourth stage is called Banxian. Unlike the half-immortals who tell fortune on the overpass, the half-immortals among cultivators are capable of comprehending the laws of the world, surpassing life and death, and integrating their body and mind into the laws of the world. The powerful half-immortals can trigger natural changes with every move and gesture. The natural cycle, laws of life and death, and even the elusive luck, cannot be interfered with in the ups and downs. A Taoist raised his hand and saw the black clouds pressing down on the city with 5 thunderbolts, scattering thousands of soldiers and horses. A monk also recited scriptures with his fingertips, and the 10,000 Buddhas Chaozong transcended countless undead spirits. A swordsman stabbed into the sky and starry rivers with one sword, cutting off the flow of time, and a swordsman cut open mountains and rivers, cutting off the country's energy and causing no one to know for thousands of years. Half immortal, only half a step away from God. And in the fifth stage, there is no explanation, only one name. True God. Jiangxie was amazed, although she longed for it, she didn't take it too seriously. I truly deserve to be a monk. I have a set of boasting skills, and the outline has made my blood boil. He seemed to completely forget that he had just returned to secular life more than a year ago. Below the detailed introduction of the stages, there are also some different words in the notes that look like supplementary content. And these contents are aimed at dividing the strength of ghosts. The same 5 stages correspond to ghosts, unjust souls, fierce ghosts, ferocious spirits, and evil spirits. In the first 2 stages, ghosts are not as good as humans, and Li ghosts and Tongtian mages are evenly matched. However, in the latter 2 stages, ghosts are stronger than humans. This is because from the beginning of the fierce ghost, ghosts have given birth to wisdom, and the most important thing about them being stronger than humans is that ghosts have clear purposes and are often very cruel and vicious, without compassion. The characteristics of coldness and ruthlessness can naturally make ghosts have fewer weaknesses and more difficult to deal with than humans. If these are true, then that monk came and went without a trace, using the diamond bowl to collect ghosts with a calm and leisurely demeanor. It seems that he didn't pay much attention to the martial artists in the messages he left me, and it's very likely that he's the so-called Heavenly Master. Jiangxie pondered. I don't know what the female ghost is, but it's clearly different from other ghosts. At least it must be a ghost. So, the monk should have saved my life. Shaking her head, Jiang Shan abandoned these thoughts. Anyway, she didn't encounter any danger at the time, and even if he had this kindness, she wouldn't admit it. No one can morally kidnap him. But let's just say that I owe him a favor, but the premise is that it really works. Jiang Shan thought and happily opened the section that detailed the methods of cultivation. This scripture is not complete, and it is not surprising that the monk only allowed Jiang Shan to practice as a martial artist. This scripture only applies to martial artists, and there will be no more in the future. The way of cultivation is also very compatible with the word stop, because according to the scriptures, it is necessary to let everything go, not only to have no distractions, but also to forget one's own name, and a blank mind is the best state. Then by reciting scriptures and using merit as a medium, one can connect with various Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Through contemplation and worship, one can benefit from it and turn their merits into a source of strength. In other words, unlike the spiritual energy in cultivation novels, in reality, if one wants to cultivate, hard currency is merit. So, the problem arose. No wonder it was said earlier that in order to practice, one must first do good deeds for 10 years, and communicate with heaven and earth through merit and virtue. After spending half a day, one must lead a virtuous person to practice. Jiang Shan's expression was somewhat distorted. It's easy to say whether you want money, life, or chastity, but it's a bit difficult to be honest about your merits. What kind of merit comes from his high-intensity daily viewing of various hellish pleasures and his behavior of doing various immoral things? Even the monks said that merits and virtues would retreat from him, and blessings would gradually fade away. So, why not cultivate a ghost-like profession? The monks said that if there is any misfortune in me, it will become a great calamity. I can only resolve the calamity by transcending the mundane. If it is true, then I cannot accumulate merit now. If I cannot accumulate merit, I cannot practice. If I cannot practice, I cannot resolve the calamity. Isn't this a dead cycle? After much thought, Jiang Shan felt it was unreasonable. This is simply not giving people a way to survive. No wonder the monk ran away after putting on the beep. He must have also thought of this question, but since that's the case, why don't you just tell me it's already cold through? This made Jiang Shan feel a headache, but he couldn't find anyone who could provide help. Not to mention that the monk's whereabouts were uncertain, and he didn't even know his name. Even his master didn't know where he had gone. A few months ago, when he wanted to borrow money, he found that the temple he had lived in for over a decade was already empty. Although based on existing information, it is certainly not easy for the kind-hearted old abbot to be ordinary, but Jiang Shan can no longer count on him. Thinking about whether to take advantage of the current disaster and rely on summoning ghosts to go out and deceive for a few years before we can talk about it, a strange idea came to mind. Jiang Shan narrowed her eyes slightly and began to self-hypnotize. My master said that I owe Buddha merit and I am almost becoming a villain. In other words, at least there is a number, right? If merit can be used as money, it is equivalent to my current situation as a debtor. The ferocity is comparable to a half-immortal, which must be very impressive. Since that's the case, I must have owed a lot of money to Tiandi Bank. I owe the bank 10,000 yuan, and the bank is indifferent to me. But if I owe the bank 10 billion yuan, then I am the father of the bank. It seems reasonable to say that others rely on merit for cultivation, while I rely on lacking merit for cultivation. Do whatever you say, and Jiang Shan doesn't care about anything. He tried first and then abandoned all distractions, entering a state of luxury in luxury according to the scriptures. In an instant, the Buddha's charm suddenly appeared, highlighting Zhongxie's unparalleled peace and tranquility. If you didn't know him, perhaps you would have thought he was some kind of virtuous monk. This state of composure lasted for an unknown amount of time. When Jiang Shan recited the scriptures for the 81st time, a certain outline of existence actually appeared in his originally empty vision. But with just one glance, Jiang Shan suddenly opened her eyes. In his eyes, there were surprises, confusion, and doubt. 1,000 words eventually turned into one sentence. It's so strange, take another look. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Strange Buddha and Strange Corpse. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Strange Buddha and Strange Corpse. Jiang Shan returned to the state of luxury and meditation. Soon, he saw that thing again. As for why Tuo is used to describe it, it is because it is difficult to define what it really is. Originally, Jiang Shan thought she would really think of some Buddha or Bodhisattva, but to her surprise, it was an indescribable and even unknown creature. It is immersed in a greenish lake, emitting a mysterious aura throughout its body. The exposed part of the water is about a mountain as large, covered in mucus and constantly dripping into the lake. It is like a large fleshy ball formed by countless lumps, with strange and irregular protrusions covered with wriggling tentacles of varying lengths. Just looking at it makes people feel like they have been subjected to tremendous mental pollution. Occasionally spreading the tentacles to other places, one can vaguely see the large mouth hidden within the protrusion. One by one, the air will be eroded and twisted in waves. Jiang Shan's consciousness stared at it from such a distance, with only one sentence in her mind. You tell me this thing is Buddha. It was precisely this thought that moved slightly, as if sensed by the monster, and turned towards Jiangxi's direction. Although it didn't have eyes, Jiang Shan felt that this guy was clearly looking at him. And the next moment, an inexplicable palpitation appeared in Jiangxi's heart. It's like that's his family, or some kind of friend with special ties. I want to get close, I really want to get close to it. The image of the monster kept enlarging in Jiangxi's eyes, and the monster wriggled towards him, just as he approached the monster. The monster extended its thinnest tentacle and stuck it towards Jiangxi. Jiang Shan also reached out her hand, wanting to touch it, ding-ling-ling. Jiang Shan suddenly woke up, panting heavily, unable to break free from the strange state she had just experienced. The phone rang, but Jiang Shan couldn't answer in time. She nervously flipped through the scriptures in front of her, but couldn't find any description of the situation. The description of contemplation in the scriptures can only be described in such a short sentence. All Buddhas and Bodhisattvas stand still, while the pilgrims observe them from a distance, comprehend their form, comprehend their meaning, and have their own gains. Let's not talk about that thing for now. It has nothing to do with the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Why are you still standing still almost on your face? The phone was still ringing incessantly, and for some reason, Jiangxi's senses became much more sensitive. The ringing of the phone was infinitely amplified in his mind, making him restless and wanting to smash his phone. He couldn't help but shout, "Stop making noise." In the next moment, the phone really exploded in place with a loud bang. Jiangxi was stunned. He was not sure whether the phone exploded automatically or because he exploded himself. He slowly turned his head and looked at the alarm clock placed next to him. Don't make any noise. The alarm clock is in perfect condition. Jiang Shan breathed a sigh of relief, feeling relieved but also slightly disappointed. I'll just say it, she said. For some reason, he hesitated for a moment and then, by some strange means, imagined the alarm clock as his most disliked colleague. He gritted his teeth and let out a wicked cry, "Die for me." Then, the alarm clock disintegrated in Jiangdi's astonishment, and gear parts scattered all over the ground. He suddenly turned his head to look at the open scripture in front of him and swallowed his saliva. It's broken. Brother, it has become evil and has been repaired. After being stunned for a long time, he suddenly remembered something and quickly went to check the exploded phone. Fortunately, the phone card was just stuck in the slot and exploded, without any damage. He dug out his old phone and tried to insert the phone card. Fortunately, it can still be used. He breathed a sigh of relief and called back to the person who had just called. That is Chen Mian, the direct supervisor of Jiang Shan and the undertaker of the funeral home. Uncle Chen, what's wrong? What's going on? Why didn't you answer the phone for a long time and just turn it off? It's hard to explain, actually my phone just exploded. Can you find a more ridiculous reason? Forget it, I didn't come to you because of that. I watched the video you sent me and I have already told the leader. The leader said he also received a call from his family, saying it was a misunderstanding. You can come back and continue working. Jiang Shan was slightly surprised, but he didn't expect the other party to call first to clear his name. However, he did not feel that the other party's conscience had discovered it, but simply believed that they were afraid of inviting him out again. It was scary to invite parents, and even more terrifying was to invite dead parents, which was even more terrifying. But since the other party loosened their grip, Jiang Shan was too lazy to worry about anything more. He didn't really think about what to do to harm them, which was not in line with his core values. Jiang Shan thought that Chen Mian was calling to say this, but she didn't expect that Chen Mian had other more important things to say. "I'll go early tomorrow morning, Uncle Chen. You should rest early." "Who said you were supposed to come tomorrow?" "Come now, it's a big deal." Top of the melon. Jiang Di's expression became serious. Dinghua is a jargon in the martial arts world, which means to make people afraid. As a place to release dead people, funeral homes may also encounter some things that are difficult for ordinary people to understand. This kind of thing is called dinghua in funeral homes. And it must be very serious to make Chen Mian so serious that even Jiang Shan, a temporary worker, was called in to help. Otherwise, as Jiang Shan, this kind of news would probably only be known the next day or after the incident ended. Hanging up the phone, he put away the shimo and randomly tidied up the floor. Then, he found a wooden fish wrapped in a shoulder bag and rushed out towards the funeral home. Jiang Shan's place of residence is not far from the funeral home, and coupled with the difficulty of taking a taxi in the suburbs at night, he decided to walk instead. Along the way, Jiang Di was not idle either, as he couldn't afford to rent a house in the city and could only live in the suburbs, so the environment was not good. Rats were everywhere in the sewer searching for food, so he used these mice to conduct experiments. Through experimentation, Jiang Shan found that the move she just made to stare at someone who was pregnant didn't seem to have any effect on live animals. Apart from being able to startle these mice and flee, it didn't seem to have any strong killing power. But for all small dead objects, they can be easily destroyed. This is also similar to what is described in the book, where the magic of a martial artist can cause certain damage, but the lethality is not high. However, this is also related to Jiang Di's lack of exposure to specialized techniques. He is now like a child with all his strength, but he doesn't know how to use it, so he appears clumsy. This can be considered a martial arts sorcerer, although it feels different from what I imagined. Jiang Shan realized that he should have reached this stage by now, but he was not clear about his specific level. After all, there was no suitable benchmark for comparison, and the book described it very abstractly and roughly. He could only slowly explore based on his feelings. Just like a bare child who had just learned to light a match and everything, Jiang Xi tossed and turned all the way to the funeral home. It's not an exaggeration to say that he would stare at any dog passing by on the way. Entering the funeral home, he went straight to the morgue and saw Chen Mian and another person. Chen Mian is in her 50s, wearing a pair of eyes that exude a hint of old scholarship. She has a kind and gentle expression between her eyebrows and eyes, with no wrinkles on her clothes or pants. At first glance, she is a gentle and meticulous person. The other person's name is Fang Yihang, who is about the same age as Jiang Shan, but different from his cheerful and optimistic demeanor. Fang Yihang looks very gloomy, with a silent and reserved appearance. When Jiang Shan arrives, he doesn't mean to say hello, as if Jiang Shan's arrival is a very unpleasant thing for him. Jiang Shan didn't have the intention to greet him when he saw his unpleasant face. As a temporary worker, he didn't know where he had offended him. Anyway, since the day he came, he has been at odds with Fang Yihang. Especially after Fang Yihang was told bad things about Jiang Shan behind his back, Jiang Shan became even more disgusted. He dared not say anything in person, pure and incompetent. That day, Jiang Shan attacked Fang Yihang from personality to family in front of everyone. The incident was quite big that day, and the whole funeral home went crazy. In short, after this incident, Jiang Shan and Fang Yihang never appeared at the funeral home together again, one on the day shift and the other on the evening shift. They never saw each other again. Counting the time, it has been like this for over a month now. Chen Mian was also aware of their animosity, but had no choice but to find both of them at the same time due to insufficient manpower. In order to ease the atmosphere, Chen Mian made a rare joke. "Xiao Jiang, I saw the video you sent me," and the little boy cried and called for his grandmother. "What's wrong?" You wouldn't really invite his grandmother to prove yourself, would you? Zhongxie felt a bit awkward, wanting to laugh but not daring to. She shook her head and said, how could that be? I could have that ability. Perhaps a child realized their mistake and repented. Didn't you see that person surnamed Wang shamefully hiding in the restroom? That's the best. After practicing de shi Motha, Zhongxi's perception became much more sensitive. Not only did he have 5 senses, but he could also capture some clues about people's emotional changes. He clearly felt that Fang Yihang seemed to be even more gloomy when he heard these words. But before he had time to think about it, Chen Mian began to introduce this strange story, and the first thing he said was rocket. This evening, a very strange corpse was delivered. I'm afraid we need to do a ritual. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Helplessness. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Helplessness, is it so serious? Zhongxie became serious. Chen Mian has been working here for more than 30 years, from being a dull boy at the beginning to a steady veteran who has seen storms, naturally possessing some skills. Zhongxie had long heard that several decades ago, funeral homes were not as peaceful as they are now. There were many strange things at that time, and there was no specialized funeral profession in schools. Most of them were taught by masters and apprentices, passed down from generation to generation. Chen Mian was not originally in this industry, but a college student studying history. He entered the industry due to financial constraints and learned some skills from his master at the time. He worked in this place for 30 years. Some spiritual means can also suppress these dead people, and Chen Mian's intelligence is not low, surpassing the blue. For decades, even the yang energy in funeral homes has become much stronger. However, this feudal superstition is not easy to spread, so many specific events are only passed down as legends within funeral homes. In the past, Zhongxie was also very interested in these methods, but now that he has truly come into contact with cultivation, he also understands that these so-called practices and spiritual communication are actually within the scope of ordinary people. The people who do rituals themselves do not have the ability to telepathize, and rely on the methods passed down from ancient times to achieve the effect of teleportation. For example, this is like using a fixed problem-solving template to solve a difficult problem. With good luck, you may actually be able to solve it, but with bad luck, you don't even have a step score. Pay attention to form, but cannot see the essence clearly. And true martial artists can solve problems on their own. Of course, this is also because Zhongxi's vision has increased. For ordinary people, this is already very impressive. After all, even templates are not easily accessible. Chen Mian didn't know what Jiang Di was thinking and explained anxiously. It's just that serious. From my observation, the body sent today was not a sudden death as stated in the death certificate, but rather a death from evil. Zhongxie. Fang Yihang finally spoke up and flattered Chen Mian. Uncle Chen, since you can see it's Zhongxie, there must be a way to solve it, right? Chen Mian shook her head with a bitter smile and said, if I could solve it, I wouldn't have called you here. I can't take it down alone. I'm getting older, 20 years younger. Maybe I can still rely on the yang pressure to hold it, but now. Zhongxi's words were much simpler and more crude. It's okay, Uncle Chen. Just throw it directly into the incinerator, no matter how he died, it's just a bunch of ash anyway. Fang Yihang sneered, his eyes filled with mockery at Zhongxie. Zhongxie refused to give up and said, you're laughing at Nima, and sooner or later you'll be a mess of dust. Seeing the two of them pinching each other again, Chen Mian quickly stopped and said, stop it. If it could be solved so easily, I wouldn't have a headache anymore. Anyway, I don't need any help from you. You'll stand where I asked you to stand in a moment, and after it's over, you'll have to pay 200 yuan for overtime each person. Zhongxie immediately shut up. The 200 yuan bonus was already the full day's salary of an unregulated temporary worker. The funeral home was just that good, even the temporary worker's salary was good. Otherwise, he wouldn't have tried anything to keep this job. Seeing the two of them quiet down, Chen Mian didn't talk much and took them to a small compartment inside the morgue where they usually work. As soon as she entered the compartment, Jiang Shan understood why Chen Mian judged him to have died of evil. Because the death is too eerie. According to the data, the deceased is 62 years old, 1.72 meters tall, and weighs 83 kilograms. As a middle-aged man, this weight is undoubtedly overweight. But at this moment, what was in front of Jiang Shan was a dry corpse, skin and bones, weighing perhaps less than 30 kilograms. The skin of the corpse has already developed dark purple necrotic spots, which are very dry and loose, just like those who have undergone liposuction surgery but have not had their skin pulled. The whole body is covered with terrifying stripes and there are snake skin-like scales. In addition, the deceased had a grim expression and seemed to have suffered extreme pain before death. Another strange thing besides the first time was that the body was curled up and completely stiff. Jiang Di put on gloves and broke it, only to find that unless the bones of the body were broken, its movements could not be changed. This is. Fang Yihang instinctively took a few steps back with disgust on his face. Chen Mian explained, it is said that it was normal when it was sent to the hospital, and there was still one breath at that time, but unfortunately it was not rescued. There were no wounds on the body of the corpse. Upon examination, it was found to have heart and lung failure. After announcing death, it was sent directly over, but within a few hours of being delivered, the body gradually dried up and eventually became like this. As for why I am so certain that he is evil, it is because I have seen such a corpse when I was young. A hint of fear flashed in Chen Mian's eyes. That time, Master took a full year of rest before he finally recovered. Chen Mian is still reminiscing here, while Zhongxie has already leaned in and observed carefully over there. Suddenly, he noticed something and turned around and called out, "Uncle Chen," his eyelids seemed to bulge a little. Chen Mian first didn't believe it, and then leaned in too. After a few seconds, she was shocked and said, after quickly retreating, "You must hurry up, otherwise you may cheat." After finishing speaking, Chen Mian quickly took out some talismans and props from the cabinet and skillfully arranged them in the small room. Although anxious, his hands remained stable and everything proceeded in an orderly manner. While arranging the harm, he instructed Zhongxie and Fang Yihang to stand in the appropriate positions. Fang Yihang was trembling throughout the entire process, while Jiang Shan focused on observing how Chen Mian did it. After listening to the legend for a year, I finally saw the truth. After the decoration was completed, Chen Mian began to mutter incantations and sprinkle glutinous rice on the body incessantly. Jiang Shan was quite interested in this, as it had already returned to secular life. Without the identity of a monk, he could naturally scrutinize the little secrets of Taoism. No matter how much Chen Mian tossed and turned, the body remained unchanged, which made him very anxious. "It's broken, I don't have enough time to get it." Chen Mian was so angry that she smashed all the glutinous rice in her hand to the ground. Then, as she walked outside, she anxiously said, "No, we must contact the family of the deceased. Tonight we have to cremate it. If it's not serious, let it go on for a few months. It's better than pretending to be a corpse." Fang Yihang saw that Chen Mian had already left, and he didn't dare to stay for a second. He followed behind and pretended to say something, "I'll help you," and left the room. Jiang Di was suddenly left alone in the room. He looked at the closed door, thought for a moment, took out the wooden fish from his shoulder bag, recited the Tibetan scriptures, and knocked on the wooden fish. Dong, dong, dong. The sound of wooden fish echoed in the room, appearing particularly ethereal and eerie. What's even more eerie is that the curled-up corpse slowly sat up. A wisp of green smoke emerged from the celestial cover of the corpse and transformed into the appearance of a wealthy old man in front of Jiangxie. It was obvious that this was the old man's original appearance before he became like this. Like other ghosts, the old man's expression was also dull and eerie. Jianghu was pondering how to make this corpse more normal, but suddenly realized that she could hear the voice of the ghost. Immortal, please save my family. Our whole family has been targeted by evil forces. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Zhongxie. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Zhongxie. The sudden change startled Jianghu. Does the agreed-upon ghost lack wisdom? How can you still speak? Surprisingly, Jianghu couldn't help but wonder if this was a unique ability of martial artists in the martial arts world. With curiosity in mind, Jianghu probed and said, "What's going on? Tell me more." The old man was also polite and explained the whole story in detail. A month ago, I bought a copper statue from an antique street. I looked at the material of the pure copper and the workmanship during the Qin and Han dynasties, hoping to take a chance and see if I could find a leak. I thought it would cost a lot of money, but I didn't expect the vendor to be completely ignorant of the goods. At first, I thought I had made a profit and spent a few tens of yuan to collect the treasure, but one day when I woke up, I found that the bronze statue had actually appeared at the head of my bed. At that time, I thought it was my grandson's mischievous behavior. I didn't take it seriously when I fell asleep and placed it by my bedside. It wasn't until it appeared on my bedside for the second time that I asked my grandson, but he didn't admit that it was him who put it. That's when I realized something was wrong. That night, I placed the bronze statue in my study and locked the door before going to bed. But the next day when I woke up, it appeared again at the head of my bed. I want to throw it away, but every time I throw it away, it will reappear at my bedside the next day. I'm going crazy, but what's even more frustrating is that my body is getting weaker day by day. Although my family says my complexion is getting better and better, I know it's corroding me and squeezing me every day. I thought of the person who sold my bronze statue back then, who was both physically healthy and very weak. It was then that I realized he was also a victim, and only by reselling the statue could I be exposed to the curse. But I ran to the antique street to seek an explanation, but found that I couldn't find that person at all. Helpless, I had to learn from that person and bring a bronze statue to the antique street every day to see if I could find a replacement ghost, but for more than 10 days, there was not a single person asking. I became increasingly weak and desperate, until yesterday when I felt like I might not be able to hold on anymore. Finally, I told my children about this, but they not only didn't believe me, but also thought I was old and confused, saying that I was clearly very healthy. I know I will die, but I cannot let the bronze statue harm me and continue to harm my family. I will die without closing my eyes. Immortal, please help me, otherwise I won't be able to be peaceful under the 9 springs. The dull ghost stood in front of Jianghu, who kept nodding, pursing and frowning. The scene was very strange and terrifying, and if anyone saw this scene, they would probably faint on the spot. After pondering for a while, Jianghu finally spoke up and said, after listening, "I always feel like you're not a good person either." Ah! The old man clearly didn't expect Jianghu to say that, and he was also a bit confused for a moment. "Let me help you smooth it out," Jianghu said, pinching her fingers. "First, you're greedy, right? You're trying to take advantage of yourself, but you never thought you were the wrong person. Second, you're not very natural. You're unlucky. If you're lucky, wouldn't you transfer the bronze statue to another unlucky person? Third, if you've been in the rain, you have to tear someone else's umbrella. If you don't close your eyes, why do you want to be a demon and pretend to be a corpse? That's not a good thing." The old man felt a bit depressed when Jianghu spoke, feeling very unhappy in his heart. However, he couldn't find any words to refute him, so he had to secretly suppress his feelings and remain silent. However, Jianghu's words changed, "Whether you are a good person or not doesn't matter to me. Anyway, it doesn't affect me. I only care if you will cause trouble on my territory. As long as you don't act recklessly, everything is easy to say." And there's something you're saying that makes sense. Your family is innocent, so just promise not to be a demon and be cremated obediently. I'll promise you to go to your house and see what's going on, but I can't guarantee if it can be resolved. Anyway, you can choose one. Either be obedient and I'll give it a try, or keep making trouble. Not only do I ignore it, but I also overtook you on the spot. The old man struggled for a long time, but finally succeeded. Then it's up to the immortal. Don't call me a great immortal, call me a true god. Then please come on, God. Okay, go ahead. Tomorrow, be obedient and become mature. Don't make it difficult for me to do. Okay. As the conversation ended, the old man's ghost disappeared into nothingness. Jianghu looked at the body on the iron frame and it gradually stretched out, transforming into a normal lying face. Her expression also changed from ferocious to peaceful. At the same time, Jianghu was also thinking about the bronze statue mentioned by the old man. Is there any ghost that can be accommodated inside objects? I hope it's just a regular ghost, otherwise don't blame me and I'll have to run away. At this moment, the door was suddenly pushed open, and Chen Mian rushed in irritably. Fang Yiheng fell far behind and didn't seem to want to step into this room again. Damn it. I can't get through the phone. Damn it, we can't cut it first and report it later. What should we do, As she looked up, Chen Mian saw the peaceful body and froze in place. This, what's going on? Chen Mian's gaze swayed wildly between Zhongxie and the body, quite shocked by this change. Jianghu shrugged and said, I'm not good at it. I just tried to talk to him for a few words and he was coaxed. What did you say? Chen Mian suddenly pinched Jiangxi's shoulders, her glasses falling to the ground without any notice, her big eyes full of doubts, and she was very curious about Jiangxi's method of restoring the body to normal. Jianghu chuckled and said, I just told it, if there is a wish that has not been fulfilled, please dream for me and don't cause trouble for others. He will be normal, and I don't know the principle. Is it that simple? Chen Mian expressed disbelief. Jiangdi nodded and said, it's just that simple. What's the most important thing between people? It's communication. The nonsensical words made Chen Mian's expression very strange, but she still let go of Jiangxi and breathed a sigh of relief. Anyway, it's okay. At this moment, the phone rang and Chen Mian answered, hello. Are you a family member of Su Deong? Oh, I am the funeral master in charge of your old man. There's nothing urgent, everything is normal. I just want you to come over early tomorrow. The procedures are quite complicated. It's okay, you don't need to be polite, it's not troublesome. After hanging up the phone, Chen Mian looked solemnly at Jianghu and said sincerely, thank you very much this time. Jianghu waved her hand and said, Uncle Chen, don't be so outspoken. I didn't do anything special, I just did something within my scope. Oh, by the way, I just forgot to report something very important to you. Mr. Su just used your glutinous rice to put a number of 400 on the ground. I don't know what it means, you must know. Chen Mian couldn't help but laugh at the words and said, your plan has made the whole city of Los Angeles hear it. Don't even think about the prize money. If you say 200, it's 200. Jiangshan's expression instantly became cold. Oh, then Uncle Chen has nothing to do. I'll leave first. I have to hurry back to sleep, and I'll have to wait to daydream later. Seeing Jiangshan's blatant change of face, Chen Mian was not angry either. Instead, she smiled and said, well, originally I wanted to reveal to you about my plan to retire. I was thinking about asking if you have any thoughts on becoming a regular employee. Since that's the case, then go ahead and get busy. Jiangshan was almost at the door when she heard these words. She turned around and grabbed Chen Mian's shoulder, smiling obsequiously. It's already so late, Uncle Chen. Your house is far away, and I remember we'll stop by. Why don't I take you home? Let's talk about these things in detail on the way. You live in the west of the city, and I live in the east of the city. This is also called passing by. However, despite saying so, Chen Mian did not refuse. A big stone fell from her heart, and this was the most joyful moment. The two of them walked towards the funeral home, chatting and laughing. As they passed by Fang Yihang, who was at a loss, Chen Mian smiled and said, "It's already okay. You can leave now. Go to the finance department tomorrow to collect the bonus yourself." Looking at the backs of the two, Fang Yihang still didn't know what had just happened. "Is it okay now? Aren't we still going to burn the body?" The more he thought, the more strange he felt, and he bravely returned to the compartment alone. At this moment, the old man thought that Jiang Shan had already left and wanted to take advantage of no one to see what the incinerator looked like, as a psychological preparation. However, he didn't want to open his eyes and just stumble upon Fang Yihang walking in. Ghosts. Fang Yihang rolled his eyes and fell straight down. If Jiang Shan were present, she would definitely make a sharp comment. This life is straight. The funeral home was particularly quiet that night. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Verification and Harvest. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Verification and Harvest. On the way home to see Chen Mian off, Jiang Shan learned some insider information about the recent personnel changes. Because Chen Mian spent years in the morgue, her body was full of yin and yang, and she contracted many hidden diseases. On sunny days, she was fine, but on cloudy days, she felt pain all over her body and couldn't continue working. Although there are other undertakers at the funeral home, Chen Mian is undoubtedly the best one among them. Leaving like this would be a loss for the funeral home, so instructions were given to Chen Mian to complete the handover work before leaving. Simply put, you can leave, but you need to cultivate someone who is as capable as you. Both Jiang Shan and Fang Yihang have been interviewed by Chen Mian and believe that they are young people who are worth cultivating. In the unpopular environment of working in a funeral home, it is not easy to find two satisfactory people. There is only one position for Chen Mian, so choosing who to take over naturally becomes a problem. Originally, after Jiang Shan was falsely accused of stealing a ring, the successor was almost certain. However, who would have thought that Jiang Shan not only cleared his injustice, but also made such a great contribution tonight? Others may not know, but Chen Mian is very clear. If this kind of stubborn corpse cannot be properly handled, it will have endless consequences. Not to mention the fake corpse, even in the most optimistic situation, it can be as short as a few months, or as long as several years. Various supernatural events may occur in the funeral home. If all the employees run away, other families of the deceased will also find it unlucky not to send someone over, and the losses will not be just one person's funeral expenses. So in Chen Mian's mind, the balance naturally tilted towards Jiang Shan's side. Jiang Shan, who learned about these insider stories, was naturally overjoyed. Most people have a natural aversion and prejudice towards the work of funeral homes, which is why it is difficult for funeral homes to recruit people. Even temporary workers in other industries receive much better treatment, let alone formal employees with established positions. If he becomes a regular employee, it means that Jiang Shan can at least receive a guaranteed salary several times higher than now, and there is no reason not to strive for it. Therefore, Jiang Shan returned home and was excited for a long time. He even made plans for the future. When he achieved success in his cultivation, he could receive his salary while taking on private work, earn him a lot of money, and then marry Bai Fumei, reaching the pinnacle of his life. After he calmed down, he began to study the practice again. When he regained his senses, it was almost dawn and he realized that it was already early morning when he returned home. At that time, it was easy to say that he was not tired because of excitement, but until now, staying up all night, not only was he not tired, but he also felt refreshed. Jiangxi, who didn't know why, could only attribute all of this to the benefits brought by cultivation. And this knight's research was not without gains. He had already figured out the positioning of the Shimo. The monk seemed to have no intention of making Zhongxie a true martial artist, as Zhongxie discovered that the Shimo could only help him transform his merits into a very special power, but lacked methods to use these powers. That is to say, Zhongxie now has the hardware of martial artists, but there is no software that can fully utilize these hardware capabilities. Simply put, I have reached the maximum level, but I have not learned any skills. Fortunately, at the cost of most of the furniture in the house, Jianghu has figured out some basic ways to use power. Saying it rough is because it is indeed too rough. There are no ghosts, no witches, no flashy tricks, only verbal attacks with billions of malicious intent added. Let the phone be quiet, so the phone exploded, roar at the alarm clock to death, and then the alarm clock disintegrated, verbally insulted the wild cats and dogs, so they fell to the ground and fainted, attacking oneself in the mirror and then lying on the sofa for half an hour. This is not even recorded by the Shimo, it belongs exclusively to Zhongxie. The true mouth cannon attack. Zhongxie finally mastered this technique after a night of training, because adding malice was still a bit inexperienced for him. This was because he was a self-disciplined and playful person, and whether it was cursing or attacking others, he would never substitute for himself, and there was hardly any real urgency. If we were to define Zhongxi's immorality, it would be a simple, interest-driven immorality that is not mixed with any personal emotions. He simply enjoyed the process of losing merit. Although, he is indeed a very pure person. As for what is mentioned in the book, one should constantly observe and strive for progress. Zhongxie actually plans to take a break for now, as he doesn't want to see that monster again in the short term. And for some reason, he always had a feeling that it was very dangerous. If it weren't for the sound of the phone at that time, he had really touched that thing, and it's hard to say what the current situation is. After looking at the time, at 6 o'clock in the morning, after a simple wash, Zhongxie left the door and swaggered toward the funeral home with the deep-fried dough stick on the breakfast cart downstairs. When he arrived at the funeral home, it was already very lively and a farewell ceremony was being held for the body of an unknown family. Zhongxie didn't even think about it, so she just checked in and went over to join in the fun. Normally, the farewell ceremony for the remains is very formal, and there is no fun to watch. However, the farewell hall will provide drinks and dim sum, so Jiang often pretends to be the relatives and friends of the deceased, and takes the opportunity to slack off when tired, sneaking into the farewell hall to eat and drink. Eating melon seeds and listening to the life of the deceased is also a noble thing. Occasionally encountering a respected kind-hearted person, Zhongxie was also willing to silently recite scriptures and indulge in a transcendent experience. Coincidentally, while listening to the deceased's life in the farewell hall, Zhongxie happened to see Chen Mian and Fang Yihang talking in the corner. It was then that she understood that the protagonist of this farewell ceremony was the old man from last night. He leaned over, knocking on melon seeds, but didn't want to hear Fang Yihang speak ill of him just now. "Uncle Chen, there's something wrong with this body. Yesterday, I slept all night in the morgue, and I can swear that the body is absolutely abnormal." "Hey, Uncle Chen, I didn't doubt your judgment. You said it was okay at the time, and I definitely believe you completely dealt with it. I was talking about Jiang Di, he must be causing trouble." Zhongxie leaned against the pillar not far away, listening as if nothing had happened, and even comforting a few friends of the deceased who she didn't even know next to her. For him, Fang Yihang's current behavior is purely a clown jumping off a beam. He wanted to elevate Chen Mian while slandering Zhongxie, but in fact, he flattered the horse's leg instead. Because the outcome of last night itself had nothing to do with Chen Mian, it was resolved through Jiangxi. For Chen Mian, Fang Yihang's words were not just flattery, but rather a harsh blow to his face. In addition, Chen Mian himself was a very principled and aloof person, and did not disdain to take credit for others, which made him even more averse to these words. As expected, looking at Chen Mian again, her face was almost charred. Fang Yihang seemed oblivious, still talking non-stop. Finally, Chen Mian coldly interrupted him and said, "All right, stop talking. I have my own judgment, and I know what you think. To be honest, the matter of becoming a regular employee has been settled. It's Jianghu. I know you have some connections, but I don't know where I found out about my retirement. I won't pursue the past, but in the future, I advise you to put away your careful thoughts." As soon as these words were spoken, Fang Yihang stood still and couldn't say a word for a long time. "Because of yesterday's incident, did you defend me?" Jianghu muttered. However, he was also quite open-minded and did not think that Chen Mian was doing anything wrong. They were not close relatives, and even if he knew that Fang Yihang had stabbed him in the back, Chen Mian had no reason to help him before he realized his value. At the end of the day, this is reality. Jiang Shan sighed, although she understood the reason, she still felt a bit uncomfortable in her heart. Fang Yihang, was about to explain something to Chen Mian when suddenly there was a feeling like falling into an ice cellar. In such an instant, all the terrifying things from memory passed by in front of him like a lantern. Watching Fang Yihang suddenly straighten, Chen Mian was startled and watched as the back of his head hit the ground, making a crisp sound. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. CPU Master. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. CPU Master. Fang Yihang's fainting did not attract much attention, as Jiang Di appeared the next second and dragged the person away. When Jiang Shan clapped her hands and returned to Chen Mian's side, the latter remembered to ask, "Is he okay?" "It's okay, it's just an ordinary way of falling and knocking out a big bag," Jiang Shan casually replied, then turned to the MC reading the life of the deceased, and casually said with a wicked tone, "When the body says goodbye later, if they see the chubby old man transform into this, will they think that our funeral home uses dead people to refine oil?" You're too. Even though Chen Mian has been wandering in the martial arts world for many years, he couldn't help but feel that Jiang Shan's thinking was too rebellious. By the way, Chen Mian quickly changed the topic. "Did he come to you last night to daydream?" Jiang Shan had no intention of concealing anything. "Even Uncle Chen knew how to do things, and last night we went through a crisis of almost corpse fraud together. There was no need to falsely say, 'No daydream, Uncle Chen, you have to believe in science.'" So he nodded honestly. "I did it and said some strange things, so I need to verify with his family." Although Chen Mian was curious, he didn't want to ask Jiang Shan when he didn't say anything. Under his guidance, Jiang Shan also successfully found the family members of the deceased in the crowd. "This is the deceased son, Mr. Su. Mr. Su, this is my assistant Jiang Shan. He has something he wants to say to you." Mr. Su is around 40 years old, dressed in a black formal attire. Although his expression is calm, it is difficult to conceal the fatigue and haggard between his eyebrows and eyes. It can be seen that his father's death was a very big blow to him. May I ask if there's anything I can do for you?" Mr. Su asked politely. Jiang Shan didn't ask directly, but smiled and said, "Mr. Su, there are many people here, take a step to speak." Although he felt strange, Mr. Su did not refuse and followed Jiang Shan and Chen Mian to the small meeting room next to the farewell hall. Jiang Shan went ahead, and before the two of them could even reach the door, they heard Jiang Shan say, "Hey," and then another person say, followed by a dong sound, followed by a shwa 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 sound. Afterwards, Jiang Shan dragged Fang Yihang backwards and threw the unconscious Fang Yihang with two large bags on his head into the duty room not far away. Jiang Shan quickly ran over and reached out to Mr. Su, saying, "Please. Is he okay?" Mr. Su asked, his gaze occasionally drifting towards the duty room. "It's okay, I caught him sneaking into the reception room to sleep. When he got up, he was too nervous and fell down. Don't worry." Chen Mian looked at her nose, and heart as if she had not seen anything about Jiang Shan's behavior of opening her mouth. After Mr. Su and Jiang Shan entered the reception room and sat down, Chen Mian hesitated for a moment to avoid, but noticed that Jiang Shan grabbed him and asked him to stay with him. Chen Mian didn't say anything, but Jiang Shan's image in his eyes became more pleasing. "So, what's the matter with you two coming to me for?" Mr. Su took a sip of tea, put down his paper cup, and looked at the two of them. "It's like this." Jiang Di didn't beat around the bush and came straight to the point. "I have some questions I want to ask you, which will help you find the real cause of the old man's death." "The real cause of death?" Mr. Su frowned and said, "Didn't the death certificate presented by the hospital mention sudden death?" "What do you mean by that?" Jiang Shan didn't answer, instead she talked about other topics. "Did the old man bring a bronze statue home a month ago, saying it was from an antique street?" Mr. Su was a bit puzzled at first, then recalled it and said in surprise, "How did you know?" "Don't worry, it's not finished yet." Jiang Shan continued, "Later, did he ask your son if he secretly placed the bronze statue by his bedside?" Mr. Su grew up and couldn't speak, and Jiang Shan didn't care either. He continued to ask on his own. And even though he was very healthy, he always said he was weak. During the period before his sudden death, he always ran outside and didn't know what to do. "How did you know about these?" Mr. Su couldn't believe it. How could an unmasked outsider like Jiang Di be so clear about his family affairs? "Because the old man daydreamed for me last night." Jiang Shan leaned back tactically, slowly and very forcefully leaning towards the backrest of the sofa, picked up his water cup and took a sip of tea, showing a meaningful smile. "Impossible." Mr. Su waved his hand and pondered without hesitation, not to mention that daydreaming is a superstitious belief. "Even if there is one, why doesn't he daydream for me and instead give you an outsider's daydream?" Jiang Shan seemed prepared and said something that left Chen Mian stunned and Mr. Su furious. "Because your father doesn't love you anymore." This sentence was like the last straw that crushed Mr. Su. He said angrily with red eyes, "What are you talking about?" "Say it again." His mother. "Isn't this obvious? If you are a filial person, someone who makes your father feel at ease, why would he rather believe me than you as an outsider?" "It's you, don't believe him first." Jiang Shan slammed the table and instead suppressed Mr. Su. "You don't even take what your dad said seriously. When he needed help the most, you not only didn't help him, but also distrusted him and didn't take his words seriously. You pushed him into a lonely and helpless situation, so when I expressed my willingness to trust him, he would trust me so much, more than trust you. You haven't realized your mistake yet, but have you started questioning me instead? What are you doing?" Mr. Su opened his mouth, wanting to refute, but couldn't say anything. Jiang Shan sighed and glanced at Chen Mian, whose face was full of confusion, before embarking on a more advanced operation that the latter couldn't understand. "Mr. Su, you may not believe what I'm going to say next, and I don't have any evidence to convince you. However, please be patient and listen to me finish. Uncle Chen and I are fully responsible for handling the old man's affairs. Since I have already told you about the dream, I won't hide anything else from you. The old man died unjustly. When he first arrived, he couldn't even see his death. It's not an exaggeration to say that among the bodies we handled, he was the most miserable. We exerted all our strength to make him look as peaceful as he is now. Otherwise, as you know, when he was still alive, the doctors in the hospital couldn't make him lie down as comfortably as he is now. At that time, I was thinking about how much suffering the old man had to endure before he died to be so ferocious. I said, 'Old man, if you have something that you can't let go of, you can dream to me tonight and tell me that I have fulfilled your last wish. Don't let your relatives, friends, and children see that you are so disrespectful.' Hey, he really listened and lay down peacefully on the spot. He came to me at night, criticizing you guys. He said you don't believe him, he's dying, and you don't take his words seriously. Despair. Cold-hearted. I comforted him, saying that young people nowadays are busy with work and inevitably take care of them poorly. It's not that they are truly unfilial, so he feels better in his heart. There were originally few opportunities for such daydreaming, and he was afraid that even if he gave it to you, you would still not take it seriously, so he came to me. Then he told me about the bronze statue. He said it was very sinister, and when he told me, he just wanted to confide in me, so I didn't have to take it seriously. I criticized him and said, "What's the point? If we leave it unattended, what will happen if the bronze statue harms you?" At that time, the old man was so moved. He said I was a living asterisk and almost knelt down for me, saying that if he was still alive, he would have to give me a good gift and thank me. But although I am poor and short of money, my heart is very just. At that time, I rejected him. I said that life is at stake, how can money be used to measure it? But to be honest, I still have some doubts. After all, if it's just my dream, wouldn't it be a joke? That's why I came to you to verify what the old man said. I didn't expect that what the old man said was really true. He gave a soft click and looked at Mr. Su with a hint of disdain, as if saying, "I didn't expect you to be as bad as he said." After hearing these words, Mr. Su couldn't calm down for a long time. Facing Jianghu, he felt a sense of guilt and dared not look directly at her. It took him a long time to make a decision. "Sorry, it's my fault for being impulsive just now. If possible, could you please come home with me? If it's really like what you said, after the matter is resolved, I will thank you well on behalf of my deceased father." End of this chapter.